Okay. Contact information, just for the recording. I figured I'd give you guys a little sense of where I came from, just not that I'm that important, but just a little bit of a background on myself. The town I hail from is called Modesto. I'm one of the people that couldn't wait to get out. I like to refer to Modesto as a place I'm from. It is, if you don't know George Lucas, if you don't know American Graffiti, it's actually what McHenry Avenue is based off of there. A lot of cruising. I did that in high school as well. It's still very much a thing. It's really lame, but for Modesto with not much to do, that's what you did. I decided to go to Cal Poly, and largely because it was, 3 hours or 4 hours away. Majored in information systems and then tacked on accounting after I got into a couple public accounting firm internships. Um, During my time there at Cal Poly, I was lucky enough to be looking around for a job and had some graphic design skills that would translate to what a young company called iFixit needed, where I'm sure, Amy knows Kyle and Luke from iFixit, but iFixit, assuming the large group is familiar with them since it's a small town. But iFixit is, started up in the dorms at Cal Poly in 2003. And so I was joining around 2006. Their first graphic designers, we kind of were making the transition into Web 2.0, if you know what that means as far as visual aesthetic, and working on a variety of different projects during that, but largely focused on graphic design. After I finished up at Cal Poly, which is about 2008, I decided to go and do some missions and humanitarian work down in Mexico City. So I spent a year doing that. And it was the worst career decision I could have made because when I came back, there was the 2009 dearth of industry market, as far as trying to get a job. I had lots of job offers beforehand and no job offers for what I was trying to, apparently study for, which is that IS accounting focus. And so ended up taking a job in development down in Vandenberg Air Force Base after I returned. And that was fun because I was really inspired by and passionate about software and never really applied myself towards really becoming a developer. But that was a job where I was able to kind of learn a fair bit about certain technologies and also experience some of the real frustration of working for some aspects of the government, which are largely for a software developer, like handcuffing you because you can't really use the best in class technology, and so you are kind of trying to figure out how to square peg round hole everything with the existing tools that they'll sign off on. So after about a year or so, year and a half of frustration and fun, and good people I was working with, I joined back up with iFixit and the folks there to start a company called Dozuki, and so that's where we're kind of coming from. I was gonna tell you a little bit about my family life, just so you guys get a full picture. That's me, obviously, with my wife, Katie, and my 3 kids. I got a 6 and a 4 and a 1-year-old. The grumpy boy in the middle there is Ari, and then Georgia and Piper, the girls there. So let's talk a little bit about iFixit and the backstory. I'm sure that you guys know this. Some of you guys know all the details or a lot more details, but just to cover the bases. I wanted to kind of split iFixit's journey into 4 different phases, and I'm also going to talk about Dozuki's journey and try and keep the analogy not too muddled. But when it comes to iFixit 1.0, back in 2003, Luke is one of the 2 founders of iFixit. Kyle's the other. And they discovered that you could really take apart a brand new laptop and sell the parts for more than the purchase price of that laptop. And so they had this kind of proven business model at that point that was very e-commerce driven. Well, it's a DIY alternative to repair. And so they'd sell the parts. And they did the obvious thing of educating the market, increasing their market size about how to do repair. And they were doing that themselves for a long time, really just trying to make that technical service manual that it was hard to get a hold of a lot easier to intuit and to read through. And then, over the course of time, it became more about, a little bit more of a mission, and largely you can kind of see the e-waste problem here in this slide, but largely really focused around the challenges of, consumer electronics and especially Apple. It maintained a very Apple-centric kind of offering as far as the products and stuff. But then you can tell that with the kind of stylized graphic there. And after a little bit of time, there was this great kind of pitch, made to Kyle and Luke about how the iFixit brand needed to stand for more than just this kind of iDevice or iNomenclature. And so changed the logo up. This I became less important and pronounced, and this, what is a Phillips screwdriver kind of overview and not Xbox icon as you might have thought, is kind of this standard or this open visual of like openness. You know, when you have a Phillips screwdriver, you think of, oh, that's a ubiquitous tool that anyone can use, and it makes it very easy. It's not a security Torx bit or something like that that is kind of feels like that's a proprietary, do not tamper kind of thing. And so that's where it became more world focused, more mission driven. And then in this last iteration so far, it's been really much focused on repair and advocacy. And so, you know, how do we advocate legislation? How do we make sure that the putting pressure as much as we can on all aspects of, you know, the people that are stakeholders in producing, you know, devices and have a potential part to play in repairability and advocating for repairability. And so that's iFixit currently. And the reason I was telling you all this is because, you know, a lot of the growth story of Dozuki is, you know, trying to find our own DNA and our own kind of mission and going through these kind of like iterative stages. About the time that I was coming back from Vandenberg, or when I was working at Vandenberg, I'd spend these long commutes going from, you know, San Luis Obispo down to Vandenberg Air Force Base, which is about an hour door to door. And I would just consume podcasts like ad nauseum on double or triple speed. And if you don't do that, you really need to. I recommend audiobooks at 1.5. I recommend news at 2.5 to 3. When it comes to podcasts, one of them that struck me was that This Week in Startups or Twist. You know, if you listen to it, I was from episode 1 on listener, and so I caught a lot of the earlier episodes. I found them very encouraging about the things that I felt, you know, kind of inspired to solve for. The world of business and creating something from scratch is very attractive. And so that's just kind of a backdrop as far as why I wanted to do something at Dozuki and kind of join back up at iFixit. So after, you know, we kind of started back up, or started up at Dozuki, we had the early days, and I call this like Dozuki 1.0. And like I said, like building something from scratch was great. You know, I got to join a group of people that already had built a product, which is kind of an unusual startup journey, and obviously something that comes with its own challenges. But you know, there was not a huge amount of risk from my standpoint in terms of being able to figure out how to bring an already existing product to market, as opposed to having to figure out what market to go after and then how to build the product. One interesting tidbit is that we spent a lot of time trying to figure out exactly what to name it. And so we called it, you know, obviously Instructables is taken. One of the guys suggested Liquid Wrench, because we were kind of going for this like dynamic feel, but Liquid Wrench, if you don't know, is a like a WD-40 type of alternative, I believe. So that was already taken, but One Look is a great tool if you're ever trying to figure out what synonyms to search for. We ended up with Dozuki, and there is a completely fabricated reason for that in the analogy of how a Dozuki works, and you know how it's this perfect cutting tool then used right. But the real reason is we just love tools, and it sounded cool, so we ended up going with that. Dozuki 1.0, and kind of like starting to get into a little bit of, you know, where we tried and threw some things on the wall, and in a little bit where we failed. You know, 1.0 was really driven by seeing a commercial need, and largely this company, Make Magazine or Make Projects, which is the site we built for them, which is a brand at the time of O'Reilly Media, was a big driver in convincing us that there was a commercial need, because they were willing to, you know, pay us a contract to spin up an alternative to iFixit.com that had a, you know, community feel and a focus on crowdsourced content with the categorization that, you know, was built into the system already, and allowed people to kind of create these step-by-step visual instructions, which is, you know, think about Instructables. It's a very similar play here. And so that's kind of what drew us into commercializing the product and calling it Dozuki. And we actually did a whole, like, you know, SaaS focused or startup focused kind of pitch. There's this demo conference up in San Jose, which you kind of pay to play. I'm happy to sidebar about that down the line, but anyway, we did this, you know, presentation on stage. It was Kyle and I talking about, you know, this is the new way that you should be teaching people how to do things like assembling a product or fixing a screen or whatever. And it was largely this like iFixit for everyone kind of ethos we were going for. And this was the original, if you guys are all graphic design focused, the lobster font that was very in vogue, the green font over here, that eventually we burned with fire. One thing I learned through this kind of initial 1.0 phase was that just like our product, our business model needed to be really something that we iterated on. And as part of the lessons learned, I don't think we did that quite as effectively as we could have. To talk about business model, we actually started off with the full, like, let's give them every box that they could have. So we had 3 products at this point. We had the guide platform, we had answers, then we had the combination of the two. And then we had, price differentiation, the price, certain features we thought would be like the upsell points. So we started out with this huge array of offerings, didn't take it simple. And had a bunch of people show a lot of interest, but it wasn't, I don't think, and it's proven to be a very sustainable focus in what we were originally focusing on. We kind of were dealing with this, which is we had the people that were like, oh, new hot stuff software, this is really cool, I could see how this could potentially be a good fit for us, let's try this out. And so we were really, this first couple early market adopters, really focused, not really getting into the people that are, needing to be convinced and really effectively convincing them in the pragmatist or beyond. So our market was also not very mature at that point either, all the markets we were going for. So in 1.0, I mean, here's some text, but I'll read through some of the highlights real quick. We tried to do everything for every person that would potentially come and pay us money. That's how excited we were about the idea of turning on a pay us money button on the website, and really just thinking, this is going to be awesome. People are going to figure this out and use the software just like we do for this need, and not really putting as much scrutiny on where is the need, what's driving it, how are they going to think about ROI, who are we talking to, what language are we using. And all of this kind of comes to the second point of we should have been learning a lot faster. And this is one of my biggest regrets I'll highlight again. And holding ourselves accountable to kind of what are these lessons learned that we've already seen, but what's the experiment we're currently on and when do we call it good? We definitely didn't focus on discovery nearly enough. We discovered enough to kind of feel like there was a potential for someone to kind of pay us money, but then we didn't go really deeper and really focus in on the big themes there as quickly as we could have. And self-service, for what it's worth, it was very helpful, meaning like you push a button and you can sign up for your own account. We started that early on. It was helpful for getting in early adopters and giving us a sense, but it wasn't something that we actually were focused on solving for, which is like really nailing the product experience in a way that will lead from initial sign up to people wanting to just grow and grow and grow. In terms of what we were focused on, it was, let's get you into a conversation and use that as an initial means of doing that. And we're just expecting you to continue to want the software. And then obviously, as many people deal with, we were building software for pretty much anyone who would pay us. And then a shift happens, and it was when we started to really focus in on this cohort of industrial companies, and that's where I call it Dozuki 2.0. And we have this background image, which is a change in marketing site, but also like a really focused visual on the industrial companies, the manufacturers we started to focus on. And we started to speak their language. We started to do these Dozuki workshop series, which was just us getting our voice out there and kind of planting a flag on what we want to be known for, trying to get closer to our customers, and being a place of thought leadership. I love this quote, we just got to learn faster. And so we did start to apply that a little bit, but, again, I still think that we had a lot to learn and we didn't learn fast enough, which is my main point here in the first point. We didn't say no quickly enough. And that was the biggest thing as a guy who likes to sell things, that we could have learned a lot faster. Saying no and knowing when to say no is a huge help in focusing where you're going to, drive towards and how you pitch your product, and what you're going to build. And so saying no was something that took emotional discipline that we didn't get to nearly as fast as we could have. We didn't switch to a high touch model, and that's something, if you're building a product, we could have spent a year plus 2 years, maybe 3 years, just focusing on that onboarding experience, to click the sign up button. And instead, you know, we did the right thing by switching to a high touch approach where you had to have a lot of people touching or talking to each other, building up the understanding of what it is they're going to be doing, and even more so now as we work with more and more enterprise companies. And that's something that, you know, is helpful for us now and is not necessarily for every business model, but where there's a high, you know, stakeholder developments, or there's a lot of, you know, moving parts, and it's not just as simple as turn it on, especially if you're going to turn them on to a blank site and they have to figure out what exactly kind of content they're going to create there. That's something that really helped us. You know, switching from, you know, this idea of like people are general people that handle everything. We had our salespeople be our account executives, be our tech support for a long time. And that was, you know, startup mode for sure. But like we could have even had specialization at that phase that we didn't embrace. And then, you know, as we had, you know, focus, it helped everyone have a better sense of where exactly they needed to focus their strategic minds. So we got better about solving for the sales process. We got better about figuring out which product deliverables were the most highest priority. Marketing got better about speaking in context and having the familiarity of language. And so, you know, all this comes down to like pick a target, be convinced of that target. That was something that we didn't do well. We're doing it better now than we ever have, but like really, you know, wish I had those years back to kind of just like stop the things we would have, you know, be better off not doing. And then, you know, this goal of trying to be the best at something, I think is a very admirable goal and something we should all ascribe to if we're building a product for our niche or for like maybe a bigger vision. But that's something that's been empowering for us and something that has really helped us kind of maintain effort, maintain energy over the course of the time. So now Dozuki is a, you know, standard work platform that's kind of a lean methodology tool. To break it down, it's just that we are helping streamline the transfer of knowledge from one person to another and keeping that inside the company, letting tribal knowledge, that leaky bucket of tribal knowledge, not, you know, continue to drip water outside, and helping that company preserve every drop of knowledge that they have. We have a much better understanding of who we are now because of a vision, because of what we seek to be and the dominance we seek to have in the chosen market that we're after. And again, it's helped every aspect of our business. We need to be able to articulate that to ourselves. And, you know, as we add more and more headcount, we need to be able to articulate that to every new person in a way that feels impactful, that gives them, you know, a sense of identity, a sense of value in working, because they can work anywhere potentially. So like, why work here? So people want that call to action, but it's also really helpful in helping us to do our jobs with the most passion, most effectiveness. So right now, you know, we're growing from 50 to hopefully over 100 over the next couple of years. We know where we need to go towards. We have this guiding light kind of mindset. It's still rough. We still have to work on, you know, kind of iterating in it, and it's not something that's like ever set in stone. But I'm very grateful we have strategically minded leaders, and as we've added those key elements over the years, we've seen an acceleration of making the right kind of decisions and the kind of course corrections. And so that's been really helpful as you know, building a company and building a team, having the right people in mind on the bus with you in the right seats to help, you know, make chaos into organized, you know, an organized focus. And I'm really excited about these COVID times, not because of COVID or any of the ramifications of it, but because it's really taught, you know, our industry especially, you know, that learning at a distance is hard and they need purpose-built tools for that. And so, you know, for us, we're expecting tailwinds from that because they need tools like Dozuki to really help, you know, figure out how to do that well. And then we're also finishing up, hopefully soon here, a Series A raise, which is kind of the big milestone for the company, and, you know, kind of switching us over from spending a lot of time incubating, you know, and kind of taking our time of when to attack and what market, which I'm very grateful for. I would not suggest that we had raised money any earlier because it would have been misleading to potential investors and just setting ourselves up for failure, in part because of the market dynamics and having to see that mature. But also in terms of learning exactly how to go to market and what is going to drive sales growth. And so, you know, finishing up the Series A now, really excited about being able to accelerate our pace of product development and sales. And just to kind of finish off a little bit here, you know, my top do-overs in this situation were, you know, not being disciplined enough to stop doing the bad things that I know were kind of lingering. not being reflective enough. There's lots of lessons over the course of like what we did in, going 1 to 2 to 3 and all the different plays we try to throw stuff on the wall, and just not listening to the signals of like, we should stop doing this. This is not going to be as meaningful. There's a much easier to understand market and drivers over here. Allowing myself to be distracted. I mean, we've been doing Dozuki for about 9-10 years now as a commercialized product, and it's really only been over the last 3 to 4 years where we've really seen our strongest growth, and that's because of that focus. But letting myself be distracted was a big challenge at times, and then routinely providing clear vision to the team. I can't speak enough about how that's really benefited our ability to scale and to pivot towards where we needed to pivot, because people understood, okay, this makes a lot more sense. If you can articulate it to me and convince me of this, then I can get behind that, and it doesn't feel like such a bet. So this is a little example photos of some of our very Zoom-based meeting, which we've been remote friendly for a long time. So this was nothing new prior to COVID, and a little on-site team meeting we had on prior to COVID in February, where we brought everyone on-site to the new office over here. And so that's about it. So I tried to keep it quick so we could have more interesting conversation around questions. If there's anything of a specific note, or you guys would like to go deeper on it, I'm here to be an open book.
Excellent. That was really good, Eric. Very impressive. I'll let folks jump in on any questions. You guys can unmute yourself. But my first one was, did you consider different brands for going after different verticals? Because you've basically determined that manufacturing is now where you're going, but have you considered like other, I don't know, landing pages, or even just different company names or something?
You asking about future state going forward, or are you asking about in the past?
In the past, I mean, you kind of, it sounded like you were trying to find what was the key vertical that sort of allowed Dozuki to really get focused and grow. But you were probably, I'm curious, what are some of the other industries that you tried to make the platform work for?
Yeah, so I'll try and answer both the questions. So the second question, like, what do we try and make it, what do we throw stuff at the wall and try to make it stick? We had online communities as one of our kind of target approaches, and that was the make projects like example. I have dozens of pitch decks that I can pull up around, Martha Stewart Living, or Kia had this kind of focused, project hacks type of thing, or the Home Depot, had this kind of like project. I think those are viable plays. The problem was that at those points, I didn't have enterprise level skills to kind of go and sell to the various marketing organizations that might be able to underwrite a 6-figure, 7-figure dollar kind of contract to kind of build that kind of community out. So, that was one approach. The other was, just kind of right next to adjacent to what iFixit focuses on, this is kind of like technical communication. And there was an area we explored, kind of an echo chamber, honestly, of technical communication, where people talk a lot about XML and content portability, and, the backdrop for a lot of the people that are going to be willing to pay these experts is the large data sets of the healthcare industry, and people who have millions of documents, and they're trying to figure out how do they organize, archive, and make use of sections of those in different formats. So that was an area we explored because of, iFixit and Dozuki. It is writing XML content, and it has that kind of portability, and so there's a little bit of play there. The product support aspect of it, so like you go to an OEM, you say, hey, we can be a front facing to your customer, reduce support calls, that actually had the second most kind of potential behind what we eventually ended up picking. And it was largely already there as far as customizability to get that. Siri's yelling at me on my watch. I'd say that just to kind of cover the gamut, like Dozuki ended up focusing on industrial manufacturers. I don't know if I really got into the details because the drivers were there. What did Dozuki do well? It's very focused on change management, revision control, approvals, and kind of the workflow of creating, visual documentation. So it's a a focused approach to creating a visual instruction and all the edits and who you want to empower to kind of collaborate around that, with the goal being to make it as easy as possible to suck in those incremental updates and move it forward. Because an article written now about, as an example, an article written now about COVID is not going to be, nearly as effective as a Wikipedia article where there are lots of edits, 6 months down the line after 100,000 people have been able to kind of like contribute their thoughts to it, and it goes through curation. So that's the value that, we can offer, but who's going to pay for that? And that was really, what drove us into the industrial sector, because they have internal, needs, and documentation is the lifeblood of manufacturers. They need to maintain strong change management. And, we had, multilingual support and other things that really benefited their focus, and they had budgets to pay for that kind of a thing. So we didn't try to answer the first question, any kind of like alternative brands, aside from like initially having a little bit more emphasis on our product names. Like Guidebook was like a trademark thing for a bit there, Answers and things like that. So no, not really a separate brand.
Got it. Thanks. All right, you guys, unmute yourself. Must have a question for Eric.
Hey, Eric, this is Amy. One of the things I most enjoyed watching in how you chose where to go was really, really detailed experimenting. It seemed to me that was kind of a way you went, like, let's try this versus this. Let's see, A and B, and drilling into that. Can you talk about your experimenting and how you decided things?
That's a great softball. It also is like, what I think Amy's specifically talking about there.
Well, I can't really.
All right, no worries. I'll ad lib on that one. Yeah, I think that well, we didn't do thoughtful experimentation a lot very early. We started to do a lot more thoughtful experimentation the last couple of years, and things around pricing models, things around sales process. So one of the things I'm most proud of, is because, our VP of sales, Brian, has kind of led the charge on, is the incremental improvement in how we sell to stakeholders, groups of stakeholders. If you haven't read a book called The Challenger Customer, it's a great one. It basically talks about this whole stakeholder process of, how does a vendor get selected, right? And prior to getting in front of a customer, they've probably already gone through like a round of vetting various solutions, and so like for us, and I'm sorry I'm losing the thread a little bit, but for us, what we learned over the course of the years is that we really have to pull customers through a sales process because of our industry. Our industry is a manufacturing focused industry. It's an old school industry. They do not buy software. They have not bought software historically. We're often the first time they've done any kind of major software purchase for the types of prospects we're working with. And so we need to be very opinionated about what are the stages that they have to go through, educate them through that, and also be very prescriptive about a project management approach to like, this is going to be when you launch your Dozuki site. These are the things that can be tracked as far as what we're aiming for ROI wise. This is the various stages of this kind of milestone-based approach to this project to kind of prove to you and your decision makers what that looks like. That didn't happen overnight. That took, slow incremental kind of experimentation, and that's where, I mean, to your point, Amy, we did a lot around, well, let's limit them to 30 days. Let's limit them to 2 weeks. Let's expand it to 60 days. Let's get really prescriptive and hardlined about what exactly it is that we're going to require that they go through in order to kind of have a pilot and what all that means, where we're going to be pouring resources into it. I'd say that, for us, like pricing strategy is still very much game for, for experimentation. We've got a lot of things to test once, obviously COVID dies down and we're not trying to raise prices on people who are, in the midst of this pandemic. But at some point, there's a lot of different price discrimination strategies that we're going to be playing into, trying out.
You answered exactly my question. I was really thinking about how that helped you to find your customer acquisition costs so exactly and really target what was working. I really thought that was a cool piece of your story. Thanks.
Yeah, no worries.
Hello, this is Steve. I have a question for Eric.
Hey, Steve.
From On the technical side of things, when was the code base that had been developed at iFixit ready for broader use, or did you have to do substantial retooling of the technology? And if it was the latter, how did you balance the needs for the technical retooling against the need to get to market?
Yeah, so early on, again, before we started Dozuki, we actually had a customer locked up. And that was like probably the biggest, would have been the biggest hurdle to doing it before that. So we had a company called Make Projects or Make Magazine. We built them a site called Make Projects, and that effectively took our, single customer, single tenants kind of application and had to, expand to 2, which means that we had to expand to N number of customers. So since we had already done that, the technical hurdle was a lot easier. Early on, we spent a lot more time focused on, self sign up, giving people a registration page, and coded it a lot ourselves. We did billing ourselves. A lot of things we shouldn't have done ourselves, we did ourselves. I think that because the platform really, in order to give people the ability to customize it in the way that we thought that they would want to customize it, there wasn't a whole lot of work to be done there from where we were starting. They could apply custom CSS, they could change a logo, they could modify things that were probably the most meaningful for them at that point. That we got to spend most of our time just building out the marketing side of that, or the sales and marketing side of that. Build the customer facing website, launch the self sign up page, and a few other things like that. So it was an easy decision for us, and I don't know if I can be that helpful in that regard.
Well, thank you. That's good to hear.
Eric, this is Ron. I'll ask a question. As
Sure.
you were experimenting with where this would fit, have you learned tricks about, I don't mean tricks in a bad sense, about how to describe the potential return on investment for prospective clients? Because you're a new thing. They don't really have any old examples to look at and say, well, this other company, this other technology did that. So have you had to learn tricks for giving a credible projection?
ROI is hard in our industry and with the product category that we have. And you're totally right, Ron, right on the head with, like, it's a new product category and people don't immediately think, oh, I got to put, 6 figures in the budget in annual planning for that, because obviously it's something we paid for in the past. This is usually where we're going in. We're trying to figure out where's their budget, how do we pull budget from other areas, because they see the need, they see the ROI. And so to get to the ROI, the understanding of ROI, that's another reason why we're pulling through this like sales process of stakeholder development, is that we have to, find where that ROI is. And that ROI is different depending on where we're starting. If we're talking to a manufacturing engineer, someone on the shop floor, which is a lot of the people that initially get started with Dozuki, their ROI is, their time, or, training people more effectively, again, their time, or maybe it's a quality issue, or maybe it's a safety concern. The ROI to a VP, if we're talking at a VP level, is going to be probably pretty different. Might be focused on a more macro level about the challenge of keeping people up to date, training, and knowing that there's a lot of shifts that are going on, and people leaving, or people changing jobs, or people retiring. And so for us, we've learned we have to put it through a very investigative discovery mode to verify that well, first off, there's a decision maker at some point involved, there's the budgets, there's the typical kind of qualifiers, but especially what's the drive for it, and where is the the ROI. We've seen a lot around a variety of different industrial firms, that what drives them and what tracks well as far as ROI. So we can kind of paint those pictures for them as far as, if you're not embracing standard work, then there are some pretty common things you're going to run into, because if your employees aren't doing things consistently, they're not knowing, where the source of truth is, they're not helping to make that better, then They're probably poorly trained because they're not looking at something. They haven't been trained for a while. That's going to manifest in poor quality of work. People are going to get hurt because they're not been trained correctly. So depending on the answer is it's a case-by-case basis, but the process has really been helpful in figuring that out.
Hi, Eric. This is Brian. Great presentation. I really appreciate it. I have two questions. One's just really quick. The book that you mentioned, was it the Challenger Sale?
Challenger Sale is the first one of the two. Challenger Sale is more focused on the salesperson. The Challenger customer is more focused on like the stakeholder development. Same people though.
And then the other question, do you ever help your customers build their own business case or their ROI argument? Kind of step them through things that you've seen?
Yeah, I mean, because, if you're talking to that poor guy or poor gal on the shop floor, they're like, man, I really wish I had this yesterday. How do I convince my boss that I need to deploy 1,000 tablets and get this in front of every operator so that I don't have to spend a million years in Excel like I currently do? And so those people that's more likely that we're going to have to help walk them through what does an IT purchase look like, talking to IT, talking to purchasing. What are they going to, who do they have to bring into those calls? They've never had to deal with these people. So it's a process education as well as this is ROI. We ultimately, that person most of the time is not going to be a good champion for us. They're going to be someone that gives us a sense of their version of what the need is. And then we're going to have to find a person high enough up who can kind of translate, across different teams and really lend some momentum to our goal here of getting the product adoption. But yeah, they're helpful in terms of getting a sense of ROI, and we have to coach them through it as well as they talk to initially the rest of the people in the group.
Anything else?
I have a question for Eric.
Peter.
Shoot, Peter.
Early in the company, I was going to say the landscape is kind of littered with technical people who had an internal tool of some sort and said, surely there must be other people in the world who need this. I will sell it as a general product. And how did you get over the speed bump of knowing whether that was true or not? And I have kind of a second question, that is, for this group that you've landed on, this technical manufacturing, internal training seems to be the focus that you've landed on. What did you find that you were up against there? What is it that you're displacing? You kind of hinted that maybe it was just Excel and PowerPoint or something, but I'd love to hear about that.
Well, there's an emotional answer and there's a monetary answer when it comes to the first part of your question. We felt like we hit fit when we could repeatedly, there was a stronger theme of people having the same pain point, and us emotionally adding hours back in, weeks back into their day, or hours back into their day, weeks back into their month. That felt really good and was very inspiring and helped us kind of continue to push on it. They also had bigger budgets, so it was a lot easier than what we were seeing before, where it's like, maybe I feel like this, but I'm not really seeing the point of why I'm spending money on this. Was honestly like a lot of the earlier on conversations, because we started to kind of get our early adopters started to age a little bit. So they're like, well, it's coming renewal time. Why did I do this? We just haven't used it well. And we weren't a system of record, which is 99% of what we are for a company like a manufacturer. They're using us day in, day out. They need, our tool because that's a they need to reference us consistently. The second part of your question, what are we displacing? And we're, you correctly, astute observation there, in that we are focused on being a training solution or a training platform. I'd say that, around 1.0, we were more focused on displacing, as we focused on this industrial firm, the industrial kind of focus, we're more focused on displacing desktop publishing tools. Let's get you off of Microsoft Word, PowerPoint, Excel. Let's get you into the best platform, the best technology that you can use, which is web technology, which makes it device agnostic, allows us to push out updates and get you the the updates that are meaningful to you as we work on your problems. There's value there, but the problem is that what we were focusing on was document management, and document management is a huge challenge that appeals more towards enterprises of scale, which was not our core focus at that time. But it does not present just one example, like if I'm an operator and I go in and see that, okay, here's the thing that I need to learn how to do. I'm going to go review that, learn how to do it, or create a guide, you know, create a procedure. You know, what's drawing me back into that system? You know, a lot of times it just felt like it was just a more convenient, you know, templated, you know, and streamlined Microsoft Word or PowerPoint. And that's not as much value as we felt like we could offer. And so the focus on training now is trying to have someone have a moment by moment need to log into Dozuki, because the content they already have in Dozuki, we can add a lot more value and we can track engagement around that content. So we can tell them this, you know, like one type of engagement would be like, has this person been certified on this piece of equipment? And now you can immediately say, well, this group of people is certified and now they're going to be recertified every 30 days. And this group of people is not certified or has never been certified. That kind of draw into, you know, engagement around the content. It's very helpful for us to be even a more powerful system of record. And, you know, there's lots to kind of build towards in that regard when it comes to skills management and other things that we can add to, you know, our customers. You know, that the hesitation in that has only been that LMS spaces is super noisy. And so thankfully though, you know, we're not an LMS, and we are, you know, have LMS-like functionality. We're an industrial training platform, and LMSs have never focused fully on manufacturing because they've been too focused on the HR people in the various corporate offices of, you know, how do I track my sexual harassment training, and, you know, all the people that Cornerstone, for as one example, sells to. No one is focused on the job training, you know, like how do I do my job? And, you know, how do I tie that into some kind of learning system that keeps that a sustainable thing that I can continue on with and streamline that for me. And so you need a purpose-built tool for that, is my point. And so that's what we're trying to solve for and be.
Great, thanks.
Of course.
Yeah, I think the standard operating procedures is very valuable to a company, because that's when you have to onboard somebody new. I can tell you that just my little company, that's been my biggest challenge, because I would spend so much time trying to get even a student up to speed and maybe have them for 6 months and then they're gone. And the thought of having to go through that again with the next person, because it's constantly changing in publishing. So it has to be a very fluid system. So I can see the value, if that's what it is.
No, yeah, totally.
So Eric, this is Ron again.
Digital transformations, actually go for it, Ron, sorry.
Well, just to follow on, you said system of record. Do each of the people who are using it for training, do they know the name Dozuki? Are they logging into Dozuki so they leave there remembering that name?
Yes. It's kind of riddled throughout, and there's not, it was another reason why it was nice to kind of move into an internal focus, is because, you know, if you're building like a Martha Stewart Living or IKEA, you know, thing, you're living in the marketing budget, and it's all about, well, I want this pixel to be red and this pixel to be blue. It's not about the functionality of the software as much as it is like, get something that looks pretty out there. And it's a different kind of product development that we weren't as excited about focusing on. So thankfully, the internal focus, they don't care that it's Dozuki everywhere. They want to know, like, and that's actually, they like the fact that it's a tool focused on that, with all of our ethos being kind of focused on making it easier for those industrial manufacturers. Another kind of nice thing that came from picking Dozuki is that everyone thinks that we're a Japanese-owned company and super in the know about lean manufacturing, which we backdoored into after the fact, but.
Yeah, and I think you should grab doczuki.com, because you're a document. I mean, you're not,
There you
in
go.
some ways, that's important.
I'll check it right now. Someone's gonna buy it.
Yeah, what was it? There's a company. In fact, we're gonna have him on a future TechBrew. But his company name, he's a Cal Poly grad, and people often mistake him for Hathaway. Have you guys heard of Hathaway Marketing? Yeah, and
Yeah,
he
Jesse and Ryan.
Yeah, he admitted that oftentimes people just assume that they're part of Berkshire Hathaway, right? So, but he doesn't correct them. and they just have instant credibility because of the name, which happens to be the street that they lived on when they were at Cal Poly. So, all right, are there any other pressing questions? I have to honor Eric's family time. As you know, he has 3 children and a wife to get back to. Well, I really appreciate you guys all coming on. Eric, that was awesome. It was really great to learn more about you and about the company. So this was an awesome experience. And you have any parting words? Anything you want to ask for the crew?
No, let's keep the community going strong. Let me know if there's anything I can provide and follow up on.
I really appreciate that. Okay, you guys, have a great, safe month. We'll talk to you next month.
Thank you very much.
Thank
You
you.
guys, take care.
Good to see everybody.
Bye.
Bye.